In the latest episode, Jia triumphantly penned a report on a book, earning herself 100,000 won in the process. The immediate reception of her payment left Jean still grappling with disbelief, questioning the rationale behind someone offering such a sum for a mere book report. Simultaneously, Na Yang found himself engrossed in his phone when Yeonju, wearing a triumphant grin, raised a glass before him. With confidence, she declared, "See, Mr. Editor, I was right. No matter where she is or what she does, I alone know how to reignite her passion for writing." Na Yang, hesitant, remarked, it's just a book report. I'm not certain if a book report qualifies as genuine writing. Unfazed, Yeonju countered, "You never specified the type of writing you desired from Jia. Or could it be that you don't consider a book report a legitimate form of writing?" Reluctantly, Na Yang conceded, "Fine, I submit." Yeonju continued, "I am pleased you've come to your senses, Mr. Editor." Na Yang grinned, it's unmistakably her style. This book report, while casual, possesses a captivating quality. Something like this is undoubtedly worth 100,000 won. And to think, this was the girl who initially refused the money we collected for her. Yeonju promptly added, "It's not solely about the money. All I did was provide Jia with one crucial element, an atmosphere. As you may well know, Mr. Editor, the creature known as a writer is susceptible to attention. The moment she entered my domain, my task was straightforward. I needed to create a comfortable environment and establish my own rules, an atmosphere where she could translate her passion onto paper, a space where she could share this experience with her cherished comrades. This, in turn, would reignite the act of writing in her daily life." Na Yang nervously uttered, "Whoa, you sound like someone who has spent a long time planning this, writer Choi." Yeonju, with a hint of sarcasm, retorted, "On the other hand, Mr. Editor, you seem quite pleased. Does it bring you that much joy to see Jia writing again?" Na Yang chuckled, No, it's just been so long. Don't you find the way she writes strangely amusing? It's so like her. But I get the feeling that the one who adores writer Han Jia more than me is you, writer Choi. Not just that, every few years or so." He abruptly halted, realizing he was about to make an inappropriate comment. Annoyed, Yeonju questioned, "Every few years or so, what?" Na Yang, with a sly smile, replied, "It's nothing to be concerned about. I was just wondering whether it was writer Choi who was subtly influencing Jia from the sidelines or something like that." Yeonju grinned, So that's how it seemed to you, Mr. Editor." Na Yang, confused, asked, "What do you?" Yeonju interrupted him, saying, "It's nothing for you to be concerned about either." Standing up, she continued, "Well, now that's over with, you should make good on your part of the deal." Na Yang nervously inquired, "Make good?" Yeonju grinned and sat down beside Na Yang, saying, "Our bet. I seem to remember that if Jia wrote, then tonight you'd drink whatever I gave you." To evade the situation, Na Yang pretended that he didn't recall making such a promise. However, Yeonju remained persistent and said, So you won't own up to a verbal promise? Since I've only done a verbal contract with you, would you like to see how it turns out if I do a formal contract?" Na Yang, annoyed, said, I remember. "Okay, so I am fine with drinking whatever you give me tonight, writer Choi. I am also fine with drinking till I get wasted, but are you really fine with this? If I make another mistake, I can't take responsibility." Yeonju inquired, "How interesting. What do you mean by another mistake?" Na Yang replied, "Quit teasing me." Yeonju cheerfully said, "Well, anyways, bottoms up, Mr. Editor." Na Yang hesitated for a moment and then suddenly gulped the whole glass in one go. Seeing that, Yeonju offered snacks to him, but when he saw the snacks, his eyes widened in shock because all the snacks were sweets. Na Yang immediately said, "Hey, writer Choi, I know that I should respect all preferences, but do these even go well with alcohol?" Yeonju smiled and said, "What's the matter? It tastes good, a classical drink and classical things to eat with. This type of stuff is just my preference." "Well, the glass is filled up again, shall we continue?" They drank for about 3 hours, and as expected by Yeonju, Na Yang was the first one to collapse. Yeonju slowly sat near Na Yang and slid her hand through his hair, commenting, "Just look at how greasy your hair is. Does he even wash himself? That is exactly why everybody treats you like an old geezer outside." She then slid her fingers to his lips, bowed down to his ears, and whispered, "Mr. Editor, are you really asleep? You mustn't sleep here, at this rate, we might make another mistake." She softly grabbed his face and started to bring her lips towards his, but suddenly the phone rang. Yeonju immediately sat up, and when she looked at the phone, the name written on the caller ID was Sun. Yeonju gazed at Na Yang after looking at the phone. She took a deep breath, answered the call, and said, "Yes, you have reached Na Yang's phone." A child's voice came from the other side, asking, "This voice, is it older sis Yeonju?" At the same time, in Jin's house, Jia received 100,000 won in her bank account immediately and showed it to Jin. Jin remarked, "It really is amazing in many ways that you actually received the money. Maybe I should start working there too." Jia cheerfully suggested, "Should I look into whether or not there's a spot open for you?" Jin responded, "I was kidding, Jia." Jia looked at Jin and asked, "By the way, what have you been doing? Is it a game?" Jin smiled, "Yup, it's a fairly famous fighting game, and I'm on my third winning streak." It had been 2 weeks since they started dating, a time where just seeing each other made them happy. That's how it should be. However, according to Jia, it felt like nothing had changed from before they started dating. Jin was always gaming and gaming and gaming, like some sort of static tree when it came to gaming. While Jia wasn't expecting anything overly romantic, she thought it would be nice if they could act more like a couple. Suddenly, she got an idea and said, "Hey Mincheol, you said that even I could play, right? Then wanna have a match?" That's how they started playing, just the way Jia wanted. They even made a wager to sweeten the pot, the winner gets to ask the loser to do anything. It was a brilliant idea from Jia herself. Since they hadn't been dating for too long, it was the perfect excuse to create that kind of atmosphere. Regardless of whether Jia won or lost, it seemed like a flawless plan. However, Jin threw a curveball. He said, "Now that I think of it, it's quite nice outside during the evening, so if I win, can we go jogging outside?" Jia hesitantly responded, "We are doing a fair amount of exercise already, so why jog?" "You're joking, right?" Jin nonchalantly replied, "I never joke about exercise." Jia miscalculated the moment she mentioned the word wager. She was afraid something like this would happen. It felt like her life was in jeopardy. Jia thought Mincheol would go easy on her, but suddenly, he became so focused on the game, and this round, he actually won. That's how Jia's master plan fell apart. Looking quite sad because of her loss, Jin tried to console her, saying, "Don't feel so bad about yourself. It was a game in which I had a massive advantage to begin with, and if this is about the wager, I could turn a blind eye." Jia, with an exasperated and annoyed face, declared, "Wait, Jin Mincheol, where do you think you're going? Play one more game with me." Jin attempted to avoid the situation, but Jia relentlessly insisted on him, so he said, "Then how about this? Since you lost by such a narrow margin, let's just consider it your win." Jia, now teary-eyed, pleaded, "No, don't pity me, that's even worse. Trying to scurry away after winning is cowardly. Don't be like that, and just play one more round with me. Let's see how you do, and I'll know if you lose to me on purpose, okay? So play seriously." After a few hours of playing, Jia still couldn't win a single game. Jin, thoroughly exhausted, pleaded with Jia to call it quits. But Jia, with determination, insisted, saying, "This is the last round because I know this goddamn game isn't something that can be won by playing fair and square." She stood up like a zombie and continued, "So, in order to make this a fair game." Saying that, she forcefully sat facing Jin. Jin, utterly confused, exclaimed, "Jia, what are you doing? I can't see the screen." Jia grinned amusingly and declared, "What am I doing? I'm making the game fairer for both of us." She boldly started playing the game without even looking at the screen. Jin shouted, "Hey, Jia, isn't this a little too underhanded?" Jia smiled, "Underhanded? We are finally on equal grounds since we both can't see the screen. What's even more underhanded is that, even though I'm just a rookie, you'd use combos and feints." Jin replied, "That's because you told me not to go easy on you." Jia continued, "Oh really? Well, good for you. Do you want me to praise you for that?" Jin retorted, "No, that's not what I meant." Jia smiled teasingly, "The path to victory is a cold-blooded one. With this, regardless of how good you are at the game, we can play fairly." Suddenly, Jin stood up, hanging Jia upside down on his back, and continued playing the game. Jia started shouting, "Hey, Jin Mincheol, you try hard. You'd go this far just to win." Jin, with a grin, replied, "The path to victory is a cold-blooded one, Jia." Jia also started pinching and quarreling with Jin like cat and dog, and finally, she somehow won the game. Jia, elated with her victory, started dancing in happiness and exclaimed, "Now then, can we hear it?" Jin Mincheol's thoughts regarding losing to his rookie wife in a fighting game. Jin immediately shouted, "One more round," but Jia turned him down, saying, "Don't wanna, I don't play weaklings like you." Surprisingly, Jin didn't argue much and immediately admitted his defeat, saying, "If you went to such extremes just to win, I assume there's a favor that you really want from me." Jia got so into the game that she totally forgot about their wager. She didn't even think that far ahead about what she'd ask him to do. Immediately, Jia's inner devil came and told her that there's nothing to even consider. She already decided what she wanted to ask Jin from the beginning. Hearing her words, Jia remembered what she was really going to ask Jin to do. But she blushed and hesitated to ask that thing of him. Suddenly, her inner angel appeared in front of her and said, "There's an order to everything. Now, I'll tell you what words you should say, so listen closely and repeat after me." Before the angel could say anything, Jia slapped her away like a mosquito. However, Jia's angel and devil were on the same side this time, and they forced Jia to say what she had decided earlier. Jia somehow calmed herself down and emphatically uttered the words, right? So the thing is, Jin was listening to Jia attentively, and she finally declared, "Saturday at noon, the park entrance in front of the station. For every second you are late, I flick your head once." On the Saturday, Jia was waiting for Jin at the park. She was still contemplating how she somehow managed to ask Jin for a date. Despite being already married and living under the same roof, Jia couldn't comprehend why she was getting so worked up over a single date. It was past 5 minutes from the promised time Jia and Jin had agreed upon, and he still hadn't arrived. For a moment, Jia entertained the thought that Jin got late because he went for his daily workout. However, she immediately dismissed that notion, convinced that Jin is not the type of guy who would break his promises. Suddenly, she heard Jin calling her name from behind. Annoyed, she looked back, ready to scold Jin for being late. But her expression changed immediately to flabbergasted upon seeing Jin, as he looked so different from his usual self, resembling more of a model to her. Jin immediately apologized to Jia for being late, but she couldn't care more. She was just so surprised looking at Jin in his new look that she uttered, "Mr. Jia and Mincheol." Then, she started teasing him, "So, could it be that you dressed nicely just for our date? I didn't know you were capable of doing your hair." Jin shyly asked, "So, well, does it suit me?" Jia gave Jin a thumbs up, showing her happiness. She started taking pictures of Jin, saying, "Oh, nice. If I take some pictures and send them to your mom, she'll probably come running." Jin softly said, "Jia, you look pretty too." Jia was taken aback by Jin's sudden compliment, and Jin also showed his thumbs up with a big smile on his face. Jia blushed and said, "Oh, these are my regular outfits. These are basically everyday clothes for me. Whatever, let's just go." When they took a train to their next destination, Jia was blushing so much because she didn't see it coming that they would be so close to each other on the train. Suddenly, Jia noticed that Jin wore a nice perfume, the guy who doesn't own anything other than sunscreen lotion when it comes to skincare. Jin also booked a sushi place that's extremely difficult to get a reservation for. Jia couldn't believe it. Was this really the Jia and Mincheol she knows? But suddenly, Jin said, "Jia, should we go for a workout to burn some calories after we eat?" And hearing that, she understood it's really the Jia and Mincheol she knows. Jia and Jin enjoyed the gaming center together. Since Jia's hobbies and interests are different from Mincheol, she didn't expect much, but she was having more fun than she thought. Thinking back on it, they had fun the last time they went out, and when they were young, they got along pretty well. It was just like they are a good match for each other to begin with. Jia was looking at perfumes when Jin came behind her and asked, "So, is there anything you like?" He smelled Jia's hand and said, "It seems fine to me." "It suits you, Jia." Jia just couldn't believe what was happening. Jin bought her cute gifts, his manners, his kindness. It's so good. She thought if a person could change, there's no way they could change this much and in a single morning like this. Not only that, but he also started drinking first. Jia couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't the real Mincheol. However, she suddenly remembered that in the morning, Jin mentioned going to meet Choi in the office urgently, yet he didn't disclose the purpose of the meeting. Finally, Jia understood the true reason why Jin had met Choi so early in the morning. Reflecting on it, this had always been the case with Mincheol. He was the kind of guy who would invest a tremendous amount of effort when faced with a challenge. Even if it meant staying up all night, he'd strive to master whatever he set his mind to. Of course, he didn't always achieve his goals, but today, at a place Jia wasn't aware of, Mincheol had prepared earnestly for the date. Imagining Jin putting in all that effort for her, for some inexplicable reason, brought a smile to Jia's face. She grinned and declared, 100 points, today's Jia points. The date you prepared was amazing. If you had tried a little more, you could have reached 120 points. Just as I said, today, I've fallen for you. Jean looked bewildered and stammered, I don't know what you're talking about. It's not like I went out of my way to prepare for this date. I usually. Interrupting him, Jia quipped, oh really? So none of this was for the date. Does that mean we can crack open a cold beer every night from now on? Jean was left speechless, blushing in response. Contemplating her next move, Jia finally said, hey Mincheol, I'm asking this out of sheer curiosity. For today's date, just how far do you think we can go? Jean nervously questioned, how far? Jia blushed and continued, you know what I mean. You must have scoured the internet for date ideas, watched countless date courses on YouTube, you know what I'm talking about. Jean had no words to say, and he just went silent. There was absolute silence for 1, 2, 3. And it stretched into an uninterrupted 5 minutes. Jia couldn't grasp why Jean wasn't saying anything. Self-doubt crept in as she wondered if she had pushed the boundaries too far by posing that question. Suddenly, her inner devil reappeared, urging Jia that this was the perfect moment to seize, a unique scenario she might not encounter again. Jia's inner angel also resurfaced, engaging in a protest against the devil. Listening to their conflicting perspectives, Jia acknowledged that they had valid points, realizing there was no guarantee Mincheol would be ready for this again. Breaking the intense silence, Jia finally spoke up, hey Mincheol, what's taking you so long to think? It wasn't that challenging of a question. Just how far did you think we'd go with all this preparation? Jean suddenly took hold of Jia's hand and declared, all the way, Jia. I am prepared to go all the way. Jia hesitated momentarily after hearing that. So Jean pressed on, I said I am ready to go all the way with you, Jia. Just how far did you expect us to go, Jia? Jean gripped Jia's hand even more firmly and asked again, Jia, just how did you think we'd go? Jia was about to say something when suddenly someone's hand came from the side and grabbed Jin's hand. It was Li Siwu, Jia's colleague from the cafe, who shouted, stop that. Can't you see that she doesn't like it? Jean was so confused and asked, sorry, but who are you? Jia said, he's one of the employees working in our cafe. Siwu started yelling at Jean, hey mister, if you're here for hunting, please do it somewhere else. It seems you don't know, but this woman is already married, so you can't force her. Siwu immediately regretted his sudden decision and apologized for his actions after Jia explained to him that Jean is her husband. Ju Na-ri was also with Siwu, so she also apologized and said, I am sorry. You look really different from the last time I saw you two. This is not our first meeting, right? Jean remembered her and said, yes. You are the one that does squats at the gym. Ju Na-ri continued, yes, you are right. And it seems the two of you are going out on a date. Jia got flustered and said, well, rather than a date, we're going for a light drink. By the way, what about you two? What are you doing together at this hour? A date? Siwu immediately explained, no. Miss Na-ri asked me to give her a book recommendation, so we met here. After having dinner, Ju Na-ri and Siwu thanked Jia and Jean for the treat and took their leave. While walking home, suddenly Jean said, I am sorry about earlier, Jia. You know, earlier at the pub, the thing that I did to you, I pushed you too much, right? I shouldn't have pushed you hard like that. I am sorry. In reality, Jia liked it, though, so she said, don't apologize, you stupid, because today you are so cool. Actually, I was so surprised the whole day. It made me wonder, is this what an ideal date looks like? I didn't know that you thought of me this much. But, you know, it's so unlike you. Don't misunderstand, I really liked it today. It's so fun, and I am happy. But even though I like when you try to change yourself because of me, as expected, it's best when you are just yourself. Then the final score from Jia for today is 98 points. Jean hesitated before saying, wasn't it 100 points until just now? Jia said, I misused 2 points because you apologized. Jean suddenly grabbed Jia's hand, hugged her from behind, and whispered in her ears, may I get 2 points for this?